Well, good morning, SoFlo Church. Glad to see all of you here today. My name is Jamie. I'm one of the pastors here at the church. If you're new, we'd love to have the opportunity to meet you. In fact, if you're a guest, I would love for you to take the time this morning just to fill out one of the Connect cards you see right there in the seat in front of you. Fill out some basic information, drop it off at the orange New Here tent on your way out, and we would love to give you a $5 Starbucks card just to say welcome. We're glad to meet you, and we want to know you and your family. Also, I want to invite you to our First Step gathering. It's right after the service today, right there in our cafe. It'll start about 11:20. And this is an incredible opportunity if you haven't done it already, just to learn more about who we are as a church and give us an opportunity to learn more about who you are as a person and a family and your role here in the community as well. We'd love to meet you. We have pizza and salad and drinks. Your whole family is invited. So we have a few spots still available. Stop by there. If you have kids in SoFlo Kids, get the kids first, then come to the First Step gathering. But we would love to have you there. Hope to see you. Well, last week we were talking a little bit about our working lives, and like most people, I have plenty of regrettable, embarrassing, even some shameful moments in my working life. Most of us probably do if you've worked enough. And there's one that's been on my mind for a long time. I've been needing to get off my chest for like 25 years, so I thought this would be a good time to do that, just kind of in your company. So hopefully you're gracious with me. But I was, in my early 20s, working at a steakhouse in Joplin, Missouri. That's where I went to college, and working at a steakhouse. And I was working late one night on the closing shift. And if you've ever worked in a restaurant, I know some of you have, you know like the worst thing ever is when someone comes in like 5 minutes before the restaurant is supposed to close. Can I get an amen from the people, okay? And they just want to have a full meal like at 9:55. And you're like, no, we really close at 9:55. So this guy came in about 9:55 that night. And I was like, so good to see you. And I took him to his table and asked him what he wanted to drink. He wanted iced tea, got him iced tea. And it took him, a good 25 minutes to decide what he wanted to order for dinner. I patiently waited the whole time. And so finally I took his order, and he wanted to order the most expensive and also the item that took the longest to prepare item on the entire menu, a 20-ounce porterhouse steak. And I was like, well, let me go prepare that for you. And so I wrote that down, and we took it back to the kitchen. The chef began working on it. Took probably 20 minutes to get this steak ready. It's finally ready, and I'm there getting the plate ready, the garnishes and the side items, and the nicely prepared 20-ounce porterhouse steak there on the plate. I went to grab it, and I don't know if the plate was too hot or if it's just too heavy, because there's 20-ounce steak, right? Like, that's heavy. And so I grabbed it, it slipped out of my hands, and it was like slow motion as I see this plate falling to the ground. I'm like, no, I want to go home. And it smashed on the ground, and there lay the steak on the kitchen floor right next to the drain. And I had a decision I needed to make. Yeah, it was late. I was tired, and I think he was tired too. And so in that moment, I had to make a decision. What will I do? Well, will we spend another 25 minutes preparing another steak? Or will I just, rinse it off gently and put it back on the plate and take it out to him? I did what felt like the right thing in the moment. And I rinsed it off on both sides, and then I put it on a plate, and I carried it out to him. I wasn't following Jesus as closely then as I am now, okay? And I'm not proud of this moment. So I'm carrying the plate out to him, and I'm a nervous wreck. I'm like, what if he notices? What if he says something? What am I gonna do? And so I set the plate in front of him, ran back to the kitchen as fast as I could, and I'm peeking around the corner, watching him do, what if he calls me over there? And 15 seconds later, he raises his hand. I'm like, oh, no. And I went over there. I was like, can I help you, sir? He said, yeah. Can you refill my tea? I was like, yes, sir. Anything for you, sir. Woo. It feels so good to have that off my chest. And he even gave me a nice tip that night. I hope it all digested okay. I don't know. While I'm at it, I guess I should tell you about the time when I was working at McDonald's. No, you wouldn't want to hear that. So last week, we started this series talking about work. And I know some of you, you're like, yeah, it's the weekend. I don't really hear about work. And I understand that. But we know that work consumes so much of our lives that we can't leave it undiscussed. Remember last weekend we said that on average, not for all of us, but on average, we'll spend about 1/3 of our existence on earth working. Yeah, I can hear it from you. And listen, I've been in church for over 40 years now, listened to thousands and thousands of lessons and sermons, and I've never heard a single message about work or our working lives. Perhaps that's been your experience as well. And you may think, yeah, that makes sense though, because that's like work, and it's not really like a faith or spiritual issue. But that mentality would be an example of what we'd call compartmentalization. And compartmentalization is exactly what it sounds. Is what we do is we break our lives down into all these little compartments, not consciously, but subconsciously. And so we have one life, but we have all these little compartments in our life. And so we have the financial compartment, and we have the relationship compartment, and maybe sex compartment. Maybe there's a secret compartment that only you know what's inside of there, and a hobby compartment. And then, of course, we have a work compartment and a spiritual compartment as well. And we kind of do our best to try to, think, well, these compartments are sort of unrelated to each other. I have this one, and then that one, and then this one. But that's not the way life actually works. But we do tend to try hard to keep faith separated from the other compartments. And so we can come into a place like this and scratch a religious itch or express our faith or maybe check a box and feel good about ourselves. And then we can return back to our normal life where all the other compartments are. But if you've never acknowledged it already, it's a good time now to acknowledge that's not the way life in faith actually works. Faith affects and is involved in every single area of our life, so it should be, including work. There was, years ago, a rabbi named Lawrence Kushner, and he wrote this book called Jewish Spirituality. And in this book, he talked about the idea that in the Jewish mindset, there was no such thing as a spiritual life. That if you wanted to talk to a Jewish person, said, hey, I want to talk about your spiritual life, I want to talk about a spiritual issue, they would look at you confused, not understanding what you were meaning, because for them, a spiritual life, everything falls underneath that umbrella, that there is no separation one from the other. So that's true. So when you talk about work, you're actually talking about a spiritual issue. Faith has everything to do with our work. So we're spending a couple weeks talking about work. We began last week by saying for a lot of us, we didn't ask for a show of hands, but a lot of us, work is just another four-letter word. Like for a lot of us, work feels like this necessary evil. It's like, I just gotta do it. I just have to do it. I just have to get through it. But we said that actually God intended work to be a necessary good. Because the Bible tells us that we've been made by God, for God, in the image of God. And part of being made in the image of God is we've been made to work. God is a working God. God has not spent all of eternity just sitting in his heavenly lazy boy inhaling one Twinkie after another, though maybe he does sometimes, but not all the time. He was a working God, and he's also then made us to work. And some of us, a lot of us, we need to experience this paradigm shift in regards to work. That it's not just a necessary evil we have to get through, that it's a necessary good. And we need to see that because we can't spend 1/3 of our lives just dreading Mondays and delighting in Fridays and living for the weekends. And we can end up having the right attitude about work and the right attitude as we work when we realize that God intended work to be a necessary good. That's what he intended to be. And now today what I want to do is talk for a few minutes about this idea of work as an opportunity to worship. Now I know that feels like a real stretch to a lot of us. And again, it's this compartmentalization. Like, well, how would I worship when I work? Because worship is what I do when I go to church. Sometimes that's where I worship. But again, remember, faith is not just this little compartment that stays separated out from everything else going on in our life. It's an all life, all the time thing. And the same thing is true about worship. Now, it's hard to remember that about worship because many of us, we hear worship and we do immediately think that hour on Sunday morning when the music is playing. In fact, when I said worship, a whole lot of you immediately thought about music. Maybe it was a song you love. Maybe it was a hymn from years ago or recently released song. Or maybe one of the songs even we sang this morning. It's like, oh, that's worship. That's how I worship. Now, it's not a bad association to think about music when you think about worship. In fact, I believe one of the powerful ways God designed for us to worship is through music. All of us, most of us at least, have a deep connection to music of some kind in some way. Music is an incredibly powerful way to worship God, but we need to be reminded that worship is more than music, or it does get reduced down to being 1 hour, one day of the week. Here's what worship actually is. Worship is about attributing worth to someone or something. So worship, it's not a moment. Worship is not an event. Worship is a lifestyle we live. Listen to what the Apostle Paul wrote in Romans chapter 12, verse 1. He says, therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. So, if worship is a life, everything we do, then it means that there is no part of our life that's not an opportunity to worship, which means the 1/3 of our lives we spend working is also an opportunity to worship. Now, when I talk about work as an opportunity to worship, I don't mean that you're gonna be in the hallways of work always shouting hallelujahs and that you're gonna be in staff meetings and in board meetings like silently singing Amazing Grace to yourself. If you do that, you might not be invited back to any more staff meetings, which in your case may not be a bad thing. So sing to your heart's content, okay? This is not what I mean when I talk about work as an opportunity to worship. It's not about what you say or what you sing as you're working. What I'm talking about, it's how you work. Colossians 3, verse 23, the Apostle Paul wrote this. He said, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you'll receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. Now, let me give some very important context there to be transparent. When Paul was writing this letter to the Colossian church, in this particular section of the writing, he's actually addressing people that were working as slaves at that time. Understand this, he's not endorsing slavery. He's not applauding slavery. He was not okay with slavery. He knew and believed what I know and believed, that slavery was totally contrary to the heart of God. But he was acknowledging the reality that many people in that first century world were working and living as slaves. Now, slavery for them was a bit different than we know slavery and think about slavery, but it was still evil in a whole lot of ways. But what Paul wanted to do, he wanted to elevate their vision. He wanted them to know that, hey, you're working in an awful, unjust, sinful reality, because slavery of any kind is absolutely all of those things and more. But he wanted to elevate their vision. He knew that if they just thought they were working for these human masters, whether they were good to them or horrible to them, that they would have no meaning in the work and no satisfaction in the work and no purpose in the work. So he said, no, I'm gonna elevate your vision. You're working not for that human master. You're working for a heavenly master, because as Christ followers, we're to do everything as if doing it for the Lord. Now, by the grace of God, and I'll say it again, by the grace of God, we're not living in slavery situations. Sadly, there are millions of people in the world right here, right now that are. We tend to be unaware of that and blinded to that reality. There are slaves all over the world working in different slavery and human trafficking type situations. We are not, even if one person was, it'd be too many, but by the grace of God, we are not. However, the principle Paul is communicating is the same, that we are to work however we work as if we're working for the Lord. And his point is this: our work and the way we work should be a reflection of our love for and our trust in Jesus. We can't settle for the way we work to be dictated by all the changing circumstances around us. We can't allow the way we work to be determined by whether we like our boss or we don't like our boss, because remember, our vision has been elevated. Our actual boss, our actual leader is Jesus himself. And that's true no matter what your work is. Whether you work inside the home, whether you work on a highway construction crew, or you're a doctor in an emergency room, or a teacher in a classroom, or a lifeguard at a local pool, or your first part-time job at Publix, whatever it may be, you're actually working as if working for the Lord. The question is, does the way you work reflect that being true? Because when Paul wrote these Christians and he said, I want you to work as if you're working for the Lord, the implication was very, very clear. He's like, if you realize you're actually working for the Lord, you're gonna work distinctly differently from many of the other people around you. And we're gonna look at some of those practical applications of how we're gonna work when we work, if we're actually working for the Lord. The first practical idea is this, is we work honestly. Jesus is not honored at all by any kind of dishonesty, even if there's significant financial gain on the bottom line. Like, but Jesus, look at the bottom line. And he would tell you, I don't care about the bottom line. What I care about is you're working honestly. Jesus is not honored by corners being cut. Now, if you're merely working for human bosses, you know this. Not only could you get away with some of that, you'd be applauded and rewarded by some of that if you are positively increasing and enhancing the bottom line. But Jesus cannot be honored by dishonesty of any kind. That means if you're a Christ follower, and you're gonna worship through your work, it means you refuse to be involved in any kind of deal where there's even one shady detail. It means you refuse to stretch the truth even an inch to bring about a greater sense of profit. It means you will not get lost in scheming about how to make more and more and more money that involve, a loophole here and a loophole there and a loophole over here. If you want to honor Jesus with your work, you refuse to be a part of any dishonesty of any kind. Now, the book of Proverbs in the Old Testament is one of the writings I would encourage you to be reading on a regular basis. It's easy to read and understand. It's just filled with practical wisdom that keeps all of us living in the right direction, living in a God-honoring way. And in Proverbs, there's a whole lot of writing about working honestly. Proverbs chapter 11, verse 1 says, "The Lord detests the use of dishonest scales, but he delights in accurate weights." Proverbs chapter 11, verse 20, "The Lord detests people with crooked hearts, but he delights in those with integrity." Proverbs 16, verse 8, "Better to have little with godliness than to be rich and dishonest." Proverbs chapter 21, verse 6, "Wealth created by a lying tongue is a vanishing mist and a deadly trap." It's really clear as you go on and on reading those Proverbs that you can't honor God in your work if you're also being dishonest. Now, the dishonesty could be something as subtle as slightly exaggerating on the resume. It could be something as extreme as actually embezzling from the company you're working for. But in God's eyes, he sees it all the same. Dishonesty is dishonesty. He doesn't see shades of gray. He just sees black and white. Now here's the difficult place where the rubber hits the road for some of you, likely. For some of you, the commitment that I'm going to work honestly, that there's going to be no shortcuts, going to be no loopholes, there's going to be no shady details, would perhaps mean you would need to change your particular position, your job, your career, or company, organization. Because you may say, I want to be a person that is God-honoring. I want to be upstanding. I want to be a person of integrity and character. I don't want to be a part of dishonesty of any kind. However, there are some companies, organizations, maybe even governmental agencies, I'm not sure, that have dishonesty built in to the foundation of what they do and how they do it. You may be aware of that, you may not be. And in that case, if you're gonna honor God in your life, what it means is you make change. For some people, as you're growing in your faith in God, it literally might mean you have to change companies. You have to take a pay deduction. You have to walk away from a lucrative opportunity. If so, and if that's you, I don't be filled with anxiety. Don't be filled with fear. Remember who you work for. And he's the one, the Bible tells us, that the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it, that he owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, that in the world, all the gold, all the silver is actually his. Don't you think he can provide well for you, especially when you're making a commitment to honesty? He's gonna honor your honest work. And so if we're gonna worship God through our work, whatever your work may be, we work honestly. Also, we work hard. If you knew that Jesus was at the top of your organizational chart at work instead of Mary, or Larry, or Sherry, or Gary, or Terry. I'll stop there. You would never settle for less than best in your work. You would never coast through a day or through a week or a month or maybe a career. You would never just settle into autopilot a few years in the career. You would never get to the point where you're tenured and you know your job is safe and then kind of throw in the towel because what can anyone actually do about it? No, if you knew Jesus was at the top of your organizational chart where you work, what you would do is do everything you could to maximize efficiency and give your hardest effort you have and try to maximize profit and good things for your company and you individually. And so this is something that I would encourage you to do. Wherever you work, whether it's a family business or a huge Fortune 100 corporation, print out the org chart. You probably have one. Print it out on hard copy. Find the top box. Scratch out the name you find in the top box. It may feel good to do that. And write the name Jesus. And then post it in a prominent location where you work just to be reminded who you're actually working for. That's a very bad idea. Don't do that, okay? You will quickly find you're not on the organizational chart anymore very quickly. Don't do that. What I am encouraging you to do is be reminded regularly, no matter what your org chart looks like, no matter how vast it is, no matter how many layers it has, no matter where you are on it, whether you're on the top box or you're barely on that bottom rung, you barely even show up on the organizational chart, be reminded who you actually work for. You work for the Lord, and if you work for the Lord, you work hard. Proverbs also talks a lot about working hard. Proverbs 12:11 says, a hard worker has plenty of food, but a person who chases fantasies has no sense. Proverbs chapter 13, verse 11, wealth from get-rich-quick schemes quickly disappears. Wealth from hard work grows over time. Proverbs 13:4 says, lazy people want much but get little, but those who work hard will prosper. Solomon goes on and on. He's the writer of Proverbs, but his point is really, really clear, is God is honored by hard work. Maybe you also notice the connection there in his writing, that there's a connection between hard work and being rewarded even well. And God designed it to be that way. That does not mean that if you work hard, you're gonna be rich or that you're gonna live a lavish lifestyle. What it does usually mean is that if you don't, you won't. Like God kind of built out the economical world in that way that not always, but usually that if you'll work hard, there will be opportunities for you to be rewarded, even financially, because you're just working hard and you're working diligently on a regular basis. Now, this may be the most important part of the message. I need to be really, really clear. There is a vast difference between working hard and overworking. Some of you need to hear me. Don't make me call you by name. Some of you need to hear this, okay? Overworking is when you're spending so many hours and so many days and so many weeks working where there is ceased to exist any healthy balance in your life at all. No margin is totally gone. And so when you're overworking, you're missing kids' activities and games and concerts. And then even when you're with the kids, you just really can't give them meaningful attention. You're preoccupied. You can't give them meaningful activity and engage in good conversation because your mind is just elsewhere. When you're overworking, your spouse is an occasional housemate that you sometimes run into. When you're overworking, your house is like a glorified Airbnb that you just squeeze in a few hours of work. And so look, there are a lot of bosses and there are a lot of companies that will very handsomely reward you for overworking and be impressed by your overworking. Jesus is not honored or impressed by overworking. Now there's certainly, we're all gonna have times and seasons of our life when we've gotta work harder. We've got to do more. Maybe there's a big project or it's closing. You got to get the books ready, whatever it is. But when we build a life or create a habit of overworking, we're not honoring Jesus more. We're actually honoring Jesus less. Because when there's no margin, we can't live the healthy life he wants us to live. When there's no margin, then the relationships God has entrusted to us, they have no opportunity to thrive. When there's no margin, there's no opportunity for rest and recreation. And when there's no rest and recreation, then your heart and your soul was absolutely going to shrivel up and eventually die because God designed you to live with white spaces in your lives. And so if you want to honor God in your work, work hard, but don't make a habit of overworking. And so on a regular basis, if you're going to work before the sun comes up, and you're almost always still working when the sun goes down, you need to take an honest look at your life and you need to place a greater premium on getting rest. Some of you think about rest, maybe that's for sissies. Maybe rest, that's for the lazy people, that's for everyone else. Can I tell you this? God chose to rest. God did. And God's not a sissy. And God's not lazy. And God's not just the other people. God's God. And yet the Bible tells us that in the very beginning of all creation, he spent 6 days working hard, furiously creating, and on day 7 he chose to rest and enjoy the fruit of his labor. And he modeled for us this perfect balance between work and rest, and then he wants us to do the same. He doesn't want us to be people that work or rest. He wants us to be people that work and rest. And so some of us need to put in the work, pun intended, to try to develop a healthier balance of work and rest in your life. Think about this, that when you have a healthy balance of work and rest, you can honor God when you're doing both. But if you don't have a healthy balance, you can't actually honor God when you're doing either one. And so take an honest look at your working life and make sure you're working hard but not overworking. There's a very fine line. Do your best to make sure you're living on the right side of the line. One more idea about how to work well if you want to worship with your work, and it's this, it's work excellently. I have no idea if excellently is a word or not. My computer kept underlining the word, so I think it's not actually a word, okay? But you understand my idea there. If you want to honor God with your work, then good enough is not good enough. Now, we want to do excellent work, not so we can earn the love of God, not so we can earn the favor of God. We want to do excellent work because we already have the love of God, because we already have the favor of God, because of who he is. Good enough's not good enough. Now, you look back in the Old Testament and you find God when he was teaching his people the very first time how to give. You'll find that it wasn't just, fit me into your budget if you can, and give me what you have left over if you're able, fit me in. No, he was like, give me the first 10% and the best 10%. He taught them when it comes to giving, he said, no, good enough's not good enough. And when he taught them how to make sacrifices during the sacrificial system, he was very clear about how to make sacrifices. It wasn't just, if you have an animal you can kind of do without, give me that one. And you couldn't just give him the runt of the litter that no one would notice if it was gone. He said, no, you give me the very best one you have. You give me the one without any blemishes, because I'm letting you know that in these sacrifices we're set in place here, like good enough is not good enough. So giving and sacrifices, he's like, good enough's not good enough when I'm involved. And some of you may think, man, God's kind of being selfish. It's kind of rude of God. Like he always wants the best. And he's God. And remember that he's God who he was fine in and of himself, but he literally moved heaven and earth so he can invite us into a loving, saving relationship with him. Please note, there are no strings attached to that love at all. There's no strings attached to love where if you make a mistake or you trip up or you fall down, he's going to clip the strings and the love of God is going to be gone. No. It's just because we have his love, because we have his care, because we have his attention, and because he is who he is, then good enough is not good enough. That's also true in the work we do. Now, you could get away with that mentality in some workplaces, but because you as a Christ follower, you're not just working for a man or a woman. We're not just trying to accomplish the status quo. When you're worshiping God, we want to give him our very best. Now, here's what I've been thinking about in terms of this whole idea of work. That even in a culture that is decidedly shifting away from the Christian faith and people that are Christ followers, and that's happening in some not so subtle ways these days, but even in a culture like ours, I think we should find companies scrambling to hire as many Christians as they possibly can. And that's not a prejudice comment. Like, I think people of all faiths, all belief systems, all lifestyles, whatever it may be, they should have an opportunity to work and thrive and make a good income and really, really be successful. When I say that businesses, companies, governmental agencies should be scrambling to hire as many Christians as they possibly can, I mean we should be working differently. Not because we're smarter, not because we're better, not because we're holier, but because we have a different motivation than everyone else around us has, that we should be working as if we're working for the Lord. There's a lot of motivations to work. You can work for money, you can work for comfort, you can work for prestige. None of those are bad things, but we have this higher level motivation. We should be working as if working for the Lord, and that motivation changes everything. Now, as I was finishing up this preparation, thinking about this idea of worshiping through our work, I realized we have to deal with one more layer very briefly, and it's this idea that before you can worship God through your work, you have to stop worshiping work. Everyone everywhere worships something or someone. People often say, well, I'm not a person of faith. Well, we're all a person of faith. It's just what are you putting your faith in? We're all worshipers. It's just what or who are you worshiping? And so here's how you determine what or who you're worshiping. It's quite simple. It's this question: where do you look for your meaning, value, and identity? Where you look for your meaning, value, and identity is then what or who you are in fact worshiping. And there's a whole lot of possible answers to that question of where you're finding your meaning, your value, and identity. But for a whole lot of people, if we're honest, the place they're looking for it, even if they don't realize it, is in work. We find our meaning, our value, identity, and our culture at least in work. Have you ever noticed when we meet a person for the very first time, usually the second question we ask them, what do you do for work? What do you do for a living? We might ask them that before we even bother to get their name. Don't do that, it's rude. But when we're asking them that question, we're trying to create some pleasant conversation. Do you know what we're really doing subconsciously is we are looking for a very quick opportunity to attribute to them meaning, value, and identity based upon what they do, how much money we think they make, how important we think they are. That's how we attribute meaning, value, and identity based upon what you do, where you do it, and how long you've been doing it, how much money you make to do it. We don't just do that for other people, we do that for ourselves, very much so as well. And when we find our meaning, value, and identity in our work, we are turning work and everything that comes with work into a little g God. And here's what I just need to tell you, that if you're going to continue finding meaning, value, identity, and work, you will, maybe not today, but you will absolutely end up feeling extremely disappointed and you will be filled with despair. You may have a great career, but even the best careers have a whole lot of ups and downs and a lot of twists and turns. And do you know what's true about every single career? They end one day. And this is one of the reasons why when people transition into retirement, it's one of these rite of passages in life. When people move into retirement, there can be, not always, there can be significant depression and anxiety and emotional struggle that comes with that. And part of that is because schedule has changed. I don't know what to do with myself. I need to fill up my time. Do you know what's more involved than that? Is meaning and identity and value has been stripped away. I no longer have my title. I no longer have my office. I no longer have my parking spot. I'm no longer anywhere on anyone's org chart. No one cares. It's also true when people go through an extended period of unemployment. Yes, there's a natural fear and worry about how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to meet the needs for my family, my kids, and even myself? But you know, the greater issue that's going on that creates the despair is meaning, value, and identity has been stripped away. When someone asks you your name, you can tell them your name. And then they say, what do you do? And you say, and in that moment, you feel like you have no meaning, value, and identity. And that's not true at all. Because your meaning, value, and identity is not at all attached to what you do. It's attached to who you are. And that can't change. And so I would encourage you, don't wait until your career changes, is interrupted, or ends to find out where you're finding your meaning, value, and identity. And this may surprise you, it may not, but I am not immune to this struggle. Like, I'm the one up here teaching this. I'm the one, my whole job is to help people know the love of Jesus and find their meaning, value, and identity in Jesus. And I struggle with this all the time. In ministry, I have to regularly ask myself, am I finding my meaning and my value and identity in what I do or in who I'm doing it for? And so I would just encourage you. I told you I want to be very practical every week of this series, give you some things to think about to lose sleep over this next work. You can thank me for that later, but I want to give you these questions just to wrestle with moving forward. And if you're really brave, invite the people you love and care about the most into helping you answer these questions, because they'll probably be better at answering the question than you are. But here's the questions. Do you worship work, or do you worship God through your work? Let's pray together. God, we're thankful that you can just give us practical teaching from your word that applies not just on Sunday morning when we're gathered in this place, but Monday when we head into the office, or we get online, or we take our business trip. Lord, we want to be people that honor you in our work. And Lord, looking at this, it's not about shame, it's not about guilt, it's about freedom, that you want to free us up, Lord, to not have our meaning, value, and identity wrapped up in what we do, but you want it to be securely tied into whose we are, that we are children of God. And because we're children of God, we want to work hard and we want to do excellent work and we want to do honest work, just because we want to honor you, not so we can earn your love, but because we have your love. God, thank you for these hard-working people. Some of them are beginning their careers, some are well into their careers, some of them have been retired for 20 or 30 years, but whether it's in the home or out the home, we're all working people. We just want to work in a way that points to you. And we believe there should be something distinctly different about how we work just because we're children of God. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your kindness. Thank you for your mercy and your grace that you just share with us so generously. Lord, as we think through this week, help us to have some aha moments and make some paradigm shifts. Maybe if we need to make some change of work, change of salary in our lives so we can work in a way that honors you. Give us the courage and the boldness to do that. Now, Lord, we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.